Brian Hartline is the next head coach of the University of South Florida, and this was a bombshell that happened that not a ton of people were expecting. I mean, there a lot of times you get some people have some stuff here and there, but Ohio State's signing day started off with a boom, not exactly the right kind of boom, as Brian Hartline does seal it that he is going to South Florida USF next season. He is going to continue to be the offensive coordinator for Ohio State throughout the playoff time. There was some thought that maybe Keenan Bailey would do that during the playoffs if Brian Hartline was not going to do that, but USF gave their like blessing, I guess you could say, for that to happen. Ryan Day wanted it to happen. Brian Hartline wanted to finish out the season with the team. And I just got to say, the last time Ohio State had an offensive coordinator accept a job someplace else and coach throughout the playoffs, it worked out pretty well for Ohio State, right? Give me one Tom Herman there. But overall, I mean, this is not bad news for this season for Ohio State. It is, something that Ohio State's going to have to deal with down the road. And there is some stuff that Brian Hartline or that Ryan Day is going to have to deal with all of this. So welcome into the Big Ten Huddle. I'm your host, JR. Appreciate you being here. Please do like, subscribe, do all that good stuff. We're trying to reach 5,000 subscribers by the end of the year. So if you would do that, help us out. We would really appreciate it. And we'll keep giving you the good information, the intel, the kind of behind the scenes stuff of what's going on with different Big Ten programs, especially trying to get through a lot of this coaching hire stuff as well. So right now, Brian Hartline looks like it looks like Brian Hartline was not even supposed to get this job at USF from the beginning. So, long story short, I don't have every single detail of it, but from what I've been told, the timing on this really kind of sucked because USF thought they were going to go with Colin Klein, the Texas A&M offensive coordinator, but Colin Klein took the head coaching job at Kansas State when Chris Kleiman was retired, but kind of encouraged to retire over there at Kansas State. So Colin Klein got offered the job there at Kansas State with his kind of connections and history there. He goes to Kansas State. USF is finding themselves in a situation where they're like, this was supposed to be our guy. Now he just left. He went elsewhere. We don't want to, be caught here with no head coach, recruiting, all this stuff. Not that, USF was bringing in a huge recruiting class or anything, but they definitely did not want to be caught without a head coach going through signing day and everything like that. So USF goes out. They had an interview with Brian Hartline, just a few days ago. I believe it was either a few days ago or last week, one of the two. I can't remember. I know he interviewed with Kentucky really, really early this week. I think they might have done it on Sunday. But anyway, they had an interview with Brian Hartline. He impressed. He was kind of their second option. Once Colin Klein fell through unexpectedly, they went to Brian Hartline. Brian Hartline accepted the position right away because Brian Hartline wants to be a head coach. Brian Hartline wants to continue to stretch his wings. It's not that he wants to get out of Ohio State. It's just the way that Brian Hartline is hardwired. Brian Hartline is always going to look for the next challenge in his life. So whatever that is, and it just so happens that USF works out to be the best place, one of the best places possible for that. He spent a lot of time down in South Florida. He played for Miami. He's been down there a lot, and so he comes back up to Ohio to be a coach there. He was really just helping out at the beginning. He gets the job. They can all come back, him and his family, all back to Ohio, everything else. Now he's back down at USF. Good recruiting grounds for him, kind of place he wants to be. Great wide receiver area down there, right? But I think Brian Hartline is really going to push some of these Florida programs down there. He doesn't have the NIL to compete with some of those programs, but Florida State has a lame duck head coach right now. Florida just hired John Summerall, which is good for them, but we'll see how he does. And then Miami, they're the type of team that just showed you can go 10-2 and beat a playoff team who is also 10-2 and still not get into the playoffs. And that is going to drive recruits away from you because one of the reasons why, obviously money is going to bring a lot of them in, but one of the reasons why a lot of recruits will start trending toward a new college is because of the opportunity it looks like. And the opportunity for an ACC program right now does not look nearly as favorable as it once did before. And you can look at what's going on with Duke and Virginia right now in the ACC championship game. And if Duke ends up winning that game and you do not get a single ACC team in the college football playoffs, that will do incredible damage to that conference of the ACC. Obviously, we're still going to call them a Power Four conference, but they would be like fringe Power Four if that happens, reputation wise and everything else. I mean, you would have to really, really have, Florida State and Clemson kind of come back and make themselves into a really good situation to kind of gain back some of that respect for the ACC. But I do think that Brian Hartline, like I said, he's going to challenge some of these programs down there in Florida. Maybe not NIL wise, but he is going to challenge them for some of these smaller, smaller rated, not smaller, lower rated guys that Florida State, and Miami kind of go after. Obviously, UCF is down there with Scott Frost. A lot of talent down in Florida, and there's a lot of schools looking for talent down there. And I think that, if you see at some point Brian Hartline have the second best class, out of some of those Florida schools or something like that, I would not be surprised at all because he's a great recruiter and he's going to go out there and get the kind of guys that he wants. One of the guys that he wants, and we'll talk about Chris Henry Jr. in another episode. So if you're looking for information on that, I'll go ahead and link that down below. You can go watch the Chris Henry Jr. episode. But another wide receiver that we'll talk about in this one that is having effect is Jerquaden Guilford out of Indiana. So Jerquaden Guilford is the number one recruit in Indiana. He is not signed with Ohio State yet, and after hearing about the Hartline move to South Florida from Hartline, right? He told all the recruits, he told all the receivers, he's waiting to kind of see what happens here. The plan right now for Ohio State is that Day will talk extensively with both Chris Henry Jr. and Jerquaden Guilford next day. So Thursday, you're probably watching this on Thursday, though. He plans to talk with both of them extensively on Thursday, but the focus is going to be primarily on Chris Henry Jr. Jerquaden Guilford understands this. He knows how this kind of stuff works, and from what it sounds like, he's not gonna, just get up and go someplace else while this stuff is going on. And the other place that he's really thinking about is LSU with Lane Kiffin. Now, if you remember, Jerquaden Guilford was battling with Ole Miss or Ohio State was battling with Ole Miss for Jerquaden Guilford when he did commit to Ohio State for some less NIL money and stuff like that. Now looks like an opportunity for Jerquaden Guilford to get some more NIL money if Chris Henry Jr. does fall away, and that does not work with Ohio State. So Brian Hartline leaving does impact things, but I do think that Jerquaden Guilford wants to go to Ohio State. It's just if like I said, if Chris Henry Jr. doesn't work out, there's possibly more money there, and Jerquaden Guilford would have some more leverage to make that happen. Lane Kiffin, obviously, relationship with him at Ole Miss, really wanted him there, was his top option outside of Ohio State. And you could also probably look at maybe USF, not UCF, USF, where Brian Hartline is now, as a bit of a dark horse contender option here, but I don't think that's as likely. I do think that they need to be mentioned as a possibility, but I don't think that's as likely. But, you have Brian Hartline there, and Jerquaden Guilford, obviously a big piece of his decision was Brian Hartline at Ohio State, and we'll see how it goes. So, like I said, the money, big thing. Go check out the Chris Henry Jr. video if you want to, get more on that. I don't think if Chris Henry Jr. continues to sign with Ohio State, that means Jerquaden Guilford is out. I don't think that's like an automatic type of thing. I think it makes things a little bit more difficult for Ohio State. I don't think they would be able to offer as much NIL, but it's not like they would be offering them pennies on the side, right? I mean, Ohio State knew that they would have to go out and get some of these guys with more NIL money, more NIL offers to try and keep them. And so Ohio State is prepared to, not make Jerquaden Guilford the highest paid wide receiver in the class, but, do enough to make Ohio State competitive so that way they still come. And Ohio State, listen, they're still wide receiver U at this point. I mean, this whole program was not built on, one man being the wide receiver coach. You look at the history of Ohio State, they have had excellent wide receivers year after year after year, even before Brian Hartline. I mean, you had, obviously Zach Smith, he has the podcast now that he does out there. He was the wide receiver coach there. Before then, even Jim Tressel had awesome wide receivers at Ohio State. You had Ted Ginn Jr.'s, Antonio Holmes, I mean, Anthony Gonzalez, like all of these guys coming out there to do this kind of stuff and to be great wide receivers. So Ohio State didn't just have great wide receivers recently. Obviously, they're some of the best wide receivers in the NFL and everything, so that does impact things. But it's not like Ohio State wide receiver recruiting is just going to completely fall off a cliff here or anything like that. Ohio State essentially is going to go from being able to get any receiver they want for almost any amount of money they want to be able to get like the vast majority of wide receivers they want. Not any wide receiver they want, but they're still going to be able to get the vast majority of wide receivers they want. And that's why this Ohio State wide receiver coach job remains an elite job in college football. And it's one that Ryan Day is going to be fielding calls with for, a lot of time the next few days. And honestly, Ryan Day, he was a wide receiver coach before at Boston College. He continues to put out the best quarterbacks in the nation at Ohio State. I mean, that is attractive stuff as well. Yes, Brian Hartline was always attractive as a position coach, but bringing in the best of the best, which is what Ryan Day said he's going to do in the press conference with Brian Hartline leaving. He wants them to be wide receiver U, just like he wants them to be offensive line U, linebacker U. I mean, all of these positions, they want to be the best at everything. So he's going to bring in the best possible wide receiver coach, so that happens, and then he's also going to continue to deliver them with a very competitive wide receiver room that forces them to get better, and then also exceptional quarterback play and an offense that is run very, very well, as Brian Hartline has continued to run the Ryan Day offense at Ohio State, even with him as the offensive coordinator. So I would not be surprised, some people thinking about, well, who's Brian Hartline going to take with him? I would not be surprised if Brian Hartline takes Devin Jordan with him to USF, and like maybe he's his wide receiver coach or something like that. Devin Jordan, obviously a history with Ohio State, been a longtime assistant of Brian Hartline up at Ohio State. And I do think that there's a possibility here that you could see Keenan Bailey be the wide receiver coach and the full-time offensive coordinator. Right now, he's the co-offensive coordinator. You kind of had to do that to continue to get him to be at Ohio State. Right now, he's just the tight ends coach. But, I mean, Keenan Bailey is a fantastic recruiter. I know some people have some feelings, some type of way about him. But I would just remind people that no matter what Ryan Day decides here, Ryan Day is a top two coach hirer in all of college football, if not number one, the best coach hirer. I mean, you have some of these coaches go out there and they just kind of, make bad hiring decisions, for whatever type of reason. Ryan Day doesn't do that. Dan Lanning doesn't do that. And right now, Ohio State and Oregon both have open offensive coordinator positions, and we're going to see who are two of the best offensive coordinator options in all of college football, because that's who Dan Lanning and Ryan Day are going to hire. That's who Dan Lanning and Ryan Day are going to pay, because they're two of the best paying assistant coach jobs in all of college football. They're going to attract a lot of coaches, and from what I've been told, there are already coaches that are trying to contact Ryan Day about this job at this point, because it is such a great job. You see what happens. Chip Kelly got an offensive coordinator job in the NFL. Obviously, it didn't work out for him. I suppose that could happen. Maybe Chip Kelly comes back and he's the offensive coordinator, and then Brian Hartline just took the USF job after that. So a lot of good stuff happening from Ohio State offensive coordinators. The Ohio State wide receiver room is going to remain elite, as they're going to bring in a really good coach for that, and we'll see what happens. So let me know your thoughts on all of this. I mean, if you're an Ohio State fan, are you very concerned? If you're an Oregon fan or a USC fan, you're like loving this type of stuff, or an LSU fan, whatever. Like, are you loving this type of stuff? Very interested on everybody's kind of reactions to this. The big reminder I would give you is that Ryan Day is doing a lot of different stuff right now. He is prepping for the Big Ten championship against a fellow undefeated team in Indiana. He's trying to keep together this wide receiver recruiting class. He's trying to make sure this entire recruiting class comes through as well. So there's a lot of things going on with Ryan Day right now. And I got to be honest, if Ryan Day holds on to Jerquaden Guilford, holds on to Chris Henry Jr., wins the Big Ten championship, I don't think anybody should complain about him for a long, long time. It would be really, really impressive for him to make that happen. So, like I said, let me know your thoughts. Very interested in what everybody has to say and what you think on Jerquaden Guilford and everything there as well. Thanks, everybody. Have a good one.